My name is Vish Vishwanath. I'm the director of the Lee Kum Shung Center for Health and Happiness and professor of health communication at Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, as well as the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. On behalf of myself, our center, and my wonderful, wonderful team who actually do the real work behind the scenes, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome all of you and our speaker, Dr. Emiliana Simon-Thomas, whose work I have been admiring for a long time. You may not know this. There's no reason for you to know this. As we began starting the center, and as we knew that we would be starting the Center for Health and Happiness, we looked around the country and the world. Who is doing what in this space? And obviously, we came across, we always knew about your center and the wonderful work you're doing, both in terms of advancing the science of happiness, but more critically in translating that science for the greater good, as they say, public health and public good. So I'm so delighted that you have come and agreed to speak. She has a number of credentials. I can spend the next 45 minutes talking about that, her achievements, but I guess you are here to hear her rather than me. But just briefly, she has hands in both production of knowledge, science, as well as in translating that knowledge. So she has published 2 major volumes, at least that I know of, on science of happiness and in translation of it, including a handbook. In addition, she teaches a very popular course. I think only 1 million people have seen it, I believe. So on the science of happiness. She runs several programs. She's a director for science at the Berkeley Center. And I can go on and on, but here is somebody who has a hand in both science and practice and public education. So I've been a great admirer of your work. So it's great to meet you in person, and thank you for coming. So I want to welcome people also on the Zoom, as well as people in the room. I could be a poet, actually, but welcome, and then after the presentation, we'll take some questions. And if I don't leave the podium now, I will be in trouble with my team. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for that wonderful and honoring introduction. I am really privileged to be here. Of course, the admiration and respect is mutual and bidirectional. I am going to share with you some ideas and thoughts and a little background about the Big Joy Project. As you heard, the Greater Good Science Center was founded to make scientific insights available to a popular audience so that anybody who was interested in understanding their own well-being and perhaps what they might be able to do to improve it or strengthen it could learn that without necessarily having an advanced degree and without necessarily reading peer-reviewed scientific publications that can be hard for people without all of that training to access. One of the things I like to start with is a little bit of a shared understanding of what we mean by happiness. So at the Greater Good Science Center, we use the word happiness largely for its appeal, right? We knew that the average person would understand and have some relationship, some intellectual and emotional relationship to the idea of happiness, more so than the term well-being or subjective well-being or psychological well-being. But I'm really referring to one and the same when I use the word happiness. I am not referring to pleasure. I'm not referring to a moment of immediate gratification of a desire. I'm referring to something closer to this definition, which was generated by a group of scholars who were part of something called the Network for Emotional Well-Being, which was an NIH-funded initiative to try to bring the scholarship together to arrive at consensus. So emotional well-being is a multidimensional composite that encompasses how positive an individual feels generally and about life overall, It has both experiential features, such as the emotional quality of momentary and everyday experiences, and reflective features, such as judgments about life satisfaction, sense of meaning, and ability to pursue goals that can include and extend beyond the self. These features occur in the context of culture, life circumstances, resources, and life course. I understand that your recent presenter was Richie Davidson, who was part of the team that generated this definition, so maybe you're hearing it for a second time. So that I don't go through a list of different ways that well-being has been shown to be beneficial to longevity, to health, to professional success, etc., I thought I would just invite the room to weigh in. What are the benefits and advantages of being a person who would be characterized as having higher well-being? Anybody study this space or have an idea or read about something somewhere? How about I change it just to warm us up a little bit? Do you think that people who score higher on well-being are more socially appealing, more attractive to others? If you think so, raise your hand. Yeah, okay, great. Most of us like to be attractive to others in ways that are, transcend. Let's see, do you think you live longer, healthier life if you have more well-being? Yeah, do you think that there are differences in how your brain processes information that are favorable to your mental experiences if you have higher well-being? Okay, great. So not a hard sell in this room. We'll move on. So given this understanding, there's a natural interest in, well, okay, we know it's good, we know it helps, we know it's got all these benefits and advantages, so let's get better at it, right? We know that it's not purely a genetic phenomenon, that there's ways that your biology does kind of put you in a particular predicament in terms of how likely you're to have an average degree of well-being over the course of your life, but we know that your context influences how your genes express. We know that how you behave changes how you interpret information about yourself, others, and the world around you. And so there is now like this rich array of different interventions. And here, multi-component positive interventions refers to ones that use a couple different strategies. And this lovely little non-accurate graphic, which is kind of semi-informed by a Broadsman's map of what different brain areas might be more involved in, kind of lists all the different things that are part of interventions for well-being. And so there are multiple programs where you might spend 1 week learning about gratitude, you might spend 1 week learning about empathy, both the affective kind and the perspective-taking kind. You might spend a week learning about generosity. You might spend a week talking about awe. And these multi-component programs have a pretty reliable impact on well-being. People's well-being improves. And so we at the Greater Good Science Center, because we are largely an online resource, we're one of the early groups to create digital versions of well-being interventions. This is a figure from a professor at Berkeley named Giovanni Ramos, who's interested in digital mental health interventions as an opportunity space for mental health writ large in general. And basically, it summarizes the extent to which massive open online interventions, MOOIs, or online positive psychology interventions, tend to be of benefit because they make these tools and resources more available, right? More people can access them. You don't have to go to a particular place, talk to a particular person. So here's a quick rundown of some of the other programs that have already been tested and have reported and published positive findings. So Happify. This is one of the earliest apps to try to coalesce positive psychology interventions and provide them as a resource to people. Acacia Parks led this initiative, and it's published a number of different papers about its impact. So when people engage with this app longer, they tend to experience benefits to well-being and also reductions in mental health symptoms such as depression and anxiety. Judy Moskowitz recently did an RCT comparing her PARC program to a waitlist control group, and showed that it increased positive affect amongst healthcare professionals. This was all done online. The Healthy Minds program, which is the brainchild of Richie Davidson's team at the University of Wisconsin, also has reported positive impact. That program is largely emphasizes mindfulness-based interventions, but that's one of, there's variety within the mindfulness interventions. Samantha Heinzelman at Rutgers, along with Kostadin Kushlev and the late Ed Diener, created a program called Enhance, which is 12 weeks long, and they were able to show that both in-person and online versions of that, I will say the online version is synchronous and sequential. So people all sign up at the same time, and they all do the same thing over the same sequence. Also increased well-being. And then finally, a recent paper generated the 5 ways to well-being intervention, which showed global increases to well-being. So there is some precedent for having an online program that teaches multiple ways of improving well-being, having a measurable impact. Okay, so now I'm going to kind of shift for a minute into our story of the Big Joy Project. In 2021, Peggy Callahan and Jolene Smith, who are incredible global activists, they work in anti-slavery, they work in benefiting the lives of people whose lives are underprivileged and under-resourced writ large. They had the opportunity to make a film that was a documentary about the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu's friendship. So they were curious about how these people from totally different places, both activists in their own right, both passionate, both resilient, both kind of like world figures that are inspirational. How did they become friends, and what was the nature of it? It's a very inspiring and beautiful film, and they felt like we should give people something at the end of it. Let's give them something to do, because they're all like uplifted, energized. They want to be like, they want to be similarly motivated and energized and resilient in their life journey. And they reached out to Alyssa Appel at UCSF. I'm not sure how the name got found or what the connection was there. And then Alyssa said, oh yeah, let's do this. Let's call the Greater Good Science Center. Let's call Emiliana. And we all got on the phone and said, great. Actually, the Greater Good has created a website called Greater Good in Action. And it is basically a library or repository of interventions that are drawn from published research methods sections. Like, okay, we see that this is what they did and it worked. Let's describe it here and invite people to do it in their own lives. Let's just send people there. And actually, by then, we had also created an interactive program that helps guide people through practices. It was 4 weeks long. It's called The Pathway to Happiness. And they said, ooh, 4 weeks is too long. Nobody will do 4 weeks. And so we said, okay. Let's get together with our Network for Emotional Wellbeing colleagues, Alyssa's team at UCSF, the Mission Joy team, and some developers at Hop Studios. And let's create something that feels like a better fit, that feels like it matches the aesthetic and the space of opportunity. And we'll back up for a second. This is what the Greater Good Science Center's GGIA platform looks like. These are all little tabs that are what you would click on to get a specific single practice, and the single practice would have all the steps and then all the evidence. So if you really wanted to learn about the landscape of possibility, this is great. but it's not very easy to use if you don't know what you're looking for. And so we said, how do we pull stuff from this and turn it into something that people can use and have some scaffolding and stewardship around? And instead of the 4-week program, we created a 7-day program. A 7-day program has a different exercise, activity, or practice each day. And for the Mission Joy team, they were like, each practice has to take 7 minutes. They wanted this alliterative appeal, right? 7 days, 7 minutes a day, etc. So we distilled some of the practices. Well, one, we chose ones that would lend themselves to that brief completion, and then we distilled them from their original instructions to be even more kind of popularly appealing. And we kind of couched the practices, or what we called microacts, within a structure that allowed us to gather some data. Like, because we were like, oh yeah, we want to build this for you, but we also want to do science. We also want to understand how can we actually recommend to any individual person the activity that would be best for them. How can we give them something that would really serve their needs? Because right now, positive psychology is kind of like a library where you kind of got to know what you're looking for and then maybe try it. Could we know enough about who you are, your life experience, your characteristics, to say, oh, actually, from our sample, we've seen that people in that similar kind of cohort benefit the most from, and are most, have the most appealing experience is, whatever it is that our data shows. So we have people do an onboarding survey with a sample microact. So you just get to try it before you actually join the program. We ask people to tell us a little bit about what's going on in their lives, how old they are, where they live, how much stress they experience, whether they're experiencing financial hardship. And then we ask them to answer questions about well-being and well-being related factors. And then for 7 days, every day, we give them an email and a text message that says, hey, today your practice is, and you push on the link and it tells you what it is. And I'll tell you what all of them are at the next screen. We also ask people how they're feeling right then and there, and how they feel right after they've tried whichever microact we've given them. And then we nudge them again in the evening. And we're like, hey, remember you did this thing earlier? How do you feel right now? Like, we're really interested scientifically in the immediate impact, right around the practice, a little bit of a mood effect into the evening, and then week-long before and after. And so then we capture that week-long by administering a closing survey. Okay, so share a laugh is our opening practice. I would be remiss to share all of this without actually inviting us to have this experience. And then, I don't know if I have audio set up here, so I may have to ask for your patience to just hold your breath and try it after we're done. This should play an audio of a sequence. It's about 49 seconds long of little snippets of people laughing. And you might think like, ugh, a laugh track, what's that going to do for me? But really, if you open your heart for a minute and just like sit back and listen, almost every time people smile and start to giggle a little bit themselves. And laughter, levity, is something that we know has all kinds of benefits to health, well-being, and social experiences. So the other 7 that happen after you've signed on, because you've done share a laugh and you felt like, okay, this maybe makes sense, make a gratitude list. Shift your perspective. So think differently about a hardship. Celebrate another's joy. Ask another person about what brings them delight and uplift. Dwell in awe. Watch a video of Yosemite with kind of cosmic music that really just kind of puts you in a place of wonder and curiosity and connection with something greater, right? You are a force of good. So this, this was kind of a celebrity contribution. There's someone named Shah DeSimone, who is apparently like a celebrity yoga wellness kind of character in LA. And our filmmakers were like, oh, he said he would let us use his guided, you are a force of good meditation audio. Will you put it in Big Joy? And we're like, sure. So it's basically like reminding you that you can do good in the world and that you matter as a person and what you do has a positive impact. Tune into what matters, looking at values and writing about them, and then do something kind, random acts of kindness. These are the 7 that we chose. We tried to choose practices that had a really strong evidence base and then also that would lend themselves to being microtized, right? Turned into a brief exercise. All right. Examples of what it looks like in the Big Joy. We ask people to say on the past week, this happens both before and after the program, I felt hopeful, optimistic, or encouraged. This is our kind of hope optimism question. Strongly disagree to strongly agree. Happiness agency. I felt able to impact, influence, or play an active role in how happy I generally feel. Strongly disagree to strongly agree. And then finally, I've received help and support from others when I've needed it. This is a social support received item. So this is just a selection, like a specific example of a couple of the questions that are on our pre and post 7-day surveys. This is what it looks like around one specific microact. So you get your link by email or SMS text, and you push the button, and you're given this window. Now, how you feel at any moment can be a blend of different emotions, and there's no right or wrong way to feel. Please respond as accurately as you can. Right now, I am feeling pleasant emotions like delight, pride, or hope, and you can go from left, not at all, to right, a lot. Unpleasant emotions like distress, sadness, or anger, not at all, to a lot. And then you get your instructions. Make a gratitude list. I'm not going to read those out, but basically you're prompted to enter 8 things that bring you goodness in your life. And then you're asked to take a note about this, reflect freely. If you want, you can skip or go next. And then we ask for a second affect rating. Right? So we're really trying to get in the moment. It's close. It's not perfect. It's not physio, but it's in the moment, self-report, feedback about how each of these microacts is helping or not helping. We did couch this whole project as a citizen science project that is exploratory. So the messaging was very purposefully not like, this is going to make you a better person. The messaging was, hey, we're trying to understand what works for people and whether things do increase your happiness. And so you get to try things and tell us, and then at the end, we'll tell you what it looks like in your own experience. And then we get to learn a little bit more without feeling like everybody's responses are fully explained by demand characteristic, right? Okay, so this is the evening prompt. We ask again how people are feeling. We ask, and we haven't analyzed this data fully yet, but we ask people whether they expected that a particular practice when they first saw it was going to work well for them. We're trying to get at that demand characteristic in whatever way we can. It's totally not perfect, but we're really interested in whether if people were like, oh yeah, I thought that was great, are more likely to actually report benefit, after than people who don't. And then again, a chance to freely reflect. This is the personalized post-program impact report. So we tell people what the change is pre to post on their self-reported well-being. We tell people kind of how 3 different kind of pillars or areas of opportunity for improving or enhancing well-being change: your social connection, your positive emotionality, and your resilience to stress. So we're kind of capturing those from the questions on our surveys before and after. We show them their pre to post affect ratings before and after each microact. So if you're like, oh yeah, that one was dumb, it didn't work for me, or you don't actually say those words, but you report your positive and negative emotion in that way, you would be able to see which ones were most kind of impactful, appealing, relatable for you. And then finally, we do ask people after each one whether they felt like what they did was something they would want to do good again, like it was a good fit for them. And so we so people get all of this information fed back to them after a week, but of course we're also really interested in that information. So, all right, because I didn't do the laughter track, I'm going to stop us for a second and invite us to try something. And virtual people, just maybe you'll have to use your imagination. Okay, everybody stand up for a second. Okay, And turn to the person next to you and shake their hand. Find another person, shake their hand. Okay, okay. Okay, great, great, great. Okay, now, one of the two of you is going to say to the other person, you're just going to look at them and say these words, okay? Here's the words. You are absolutely fabulous. Okay, say that to the other person. Okay, okay, great. Okay. Now, other person who's smiling and a little bit maybe red, you're feeling a little bit embarrassed, it's awkward, but also delightful. You're going to say, you are impeccably terrific. So say that back. All right, great. Thank you. Have a seat, shake your shoulders. Really simple, improvised version of a microact. Someone said to me at the grocery store checkout like 2.5 weeks ago, this person couldn't imagine that I'd be talking about this as many times as I have, but they just randomly said to me, you have impeccable timing. There was no context. I was like, for what? For like buying bananas? But it felt really good. Just those little tiny connections with people where you say something kind and affirming and generous. So anyway, okay, so the first study I want to tell you about is done by my colleague and collaborator, Yubin Park, who is a postdoc at UCSF, but soon to be a professor at Rutgers. Yubin wanted to know who does this, who comes, and who participates, and what predicts whether or not a person will or will not participate. And it turns out that our data align with the general observation of psychology research, and in particular positive psychology research, which is that it tends to lean towards the weird population, white, Western, educated, industrialized, religious, democratic. Some people say white instead of Western. We know that a lot of the subjects of studies and a lot of the investigators are in a particular group. And so it's not surprising that when a particular group of people make stuff and then put it out there, other people who are in that group are going to be more likely to come and use that stuff. And so we found precisely that. People who were more willing to initiate, that means that they did one microact at all, were people who were older, female, from the US, and white. People who were less likely to initiate were people who were reported having high financial strain. Engagement or number of completed practices showed a very similar pattern, right? People who are older, white, from the US, and then kind of like a little bit higher on all the desirable well-being related measures were also more likely to do it. So there's something about people who already have some degree of well-being are drawn to this, and they tend to be more likely to engage. And again, people who are stressed and experiencing financial strain tend to drop off. They tend not to do it. Really interesting space of opportunity for us as a field to learn more about how to create resources that are more equitably appealing and useful and impactful. Yubin did a second study that has just been invited or resubmitted, addressing reviewer feedback, where she was really interested in what people put on their gratitude lists. And she made these little word clouds that are kind of thematic clusters of what tended to be on the list, and then analyzed whether what people posted impacted something about the outcomes. So, number one, female, middle-aged, older, higher education tend to list family, friends, and nature more often. So, people who are male, higher education, tend to list their partner more often. Older people tend to list health. They tend to be more likely to list health as something that they're grateful for. And then in terms of fit and impact, any reference to something social, that social relationships in the top left, tends to be rated as easier. Like if I wrote, people who say, I wrote my partner, my friend, my family, I tend to say that the gratitude list was easier if I listed something social. And if I listed my partner, I tend to also say that I like this and I would come back and do it again. So really interesting to see how these dynamics of what people put actually has some relationship to how they feel about the whole experience. And so maybe for a gratitude list, it's a good idea to be like, list something social and maybe your partner, because it'll be more fulfilling for you. We're not going to do that yet. People who list financial things that they are grateful for say that the practice was harder. And people that list family and nature in their gratitude list tend to show a bigger increase in positive affect after doing that practice. So really just kind of getting into the nuance of how do we understand more about what people are actually doing when they're doing these positive psychology interventions in a way that might enable us to optimize them for impact. Okay, Darwin Guevara, professor at the University of Miami at Ohio, did the main effects analysis to show that actually from day 0 to day 7, people's emotional well-being goes up. So pre is in blue. These are the average values. Yellow is, post is in yellow. So emotional well-being goes up, positive emotions go up, happiness agency goes up, perceived stress goes down, self-reported health goes slightly up, and quality of sleep goes slightly up. So we were actually kind of interested. This is Alyssa, I think, saying, hey, we should put some real health measures in there too, not just these well-being related measures. And then there's this kind of moderation analyses that we could do because it's not an RCT. We don't have an active control. We can at least try to understand whether certain characteristics, socio-demographic factors, actually influence how impactful the program is. And it turns out that younger participants show more of an increase in well-being and related factors. Higher financial strain and lower subjective socioeconomic status also benefit more. Remember that those people drop off, but if they stick around, they benefit more. So really interesting, again, question comes of that. Is that because they were more eager, they stuck around even though it was harder for them to stick around? Or is there actually some unique way in which these kinds of practices have a promise, an especially great promise for supporting people who are experiencing financial strain and stress? People in underrepresented groups, mixed race, Black, Latina, tend to report higher well-being. And then finally, people with lower educational attainment. So there's all this suggestion that like the people we're not serving generally, who then engage and stick with it, get more out of it. And so again, our mandate to widen the landscape of products so that everyone feels like it makes sense to them, it's appealing, and I would want to do it regardless of what's going on in my life is real for us. That's what we're working on. Orson Shu tried to really drill down on one particular set of measures, which is prosociality. So we asked people before and after Big Joy to endorse or to provide their endorsement for these 4 questions, right? I've made people feel cared for and supported. Remember, the question is thinking about the last week. I've helped people who seem to be going through a difficult time. So this is kind of interpersonal prosociality. And then we asked kind of higher level prosociality. We called them universal. I felt willing to make sacrifices to my quality of life to improve the standard of living for other people. And I felt willing to make sacrifices to protect the natural environment. So those are like, that's a big, to get someone to be strongly agree to that may be harder than the interpersonal. What Orson found, and his colleague Hitesh Goel, Orson's at Columbia, Orson and Hitesh, was that not only does the pre-post 7-day experience lead to higher endorsement of these 2 different versions of prosociality, but also it depends on how many you do, right? So overall is kind of the average across all 4. Interpersonal and universal, like if you only do 1, your kind of change is pretty minimal. Once you're getting up to 5, 6, 7, if you do all 7 days, you're going to have the greatest change to how you think about your role in the lives of others and perhaps beyond, right? If you consider the natural environment. So doing more has more impact. This is the most recent study that is, the manuscript is in preparation. This is Robin Blades, who's at UCLA, who has carefully analyzed how people report their positive feelings and negative feelings before, and then microact and right after. And on the x-axis is kind of days, on the y-axis is magnitude, blue is positive affect, so you see this pattern of before being low, after being high, and then it being slightly lower in the evening. And then it kind of drops back down the next day, but not quite. I'm walking through the blue line. Not quite as low on day 2. And it goes up after the practice, down a little bit into the evening, and then back down for day 3 morning. But again, not quite as low. So there's this impact that everybody is reporting. And I haven't said this yet, but these studies are all done on 15,000, 17,000 data points, and those are the ones who stuck around when we had 70,000 who started, right? So for some analyses, we have a much bigger sample because we're only looking at, like, we're allowing for just 1 day participants. Some analysis, we needed the whole 7 days. But regardless, there's never been one that's under 10,000 samples. So we feel pretty good about our findings when there's anything that changes. Same kind of pattern, but in the opposite direction for ratings of negative emotions. And on the right side are the same ratings in the sort of pre to post and pre to evening for positive emotions on top, negative emotions on the bottom, but on a per practice level. So gratitude list is the most powerful evoker of an increase in positive emotions and decrease in negative emotions. Awe, second. Watching this awe video has this profound influence on how people think about themselves and each other. So, this is just a friendly list of the publications, the citations for all the findings that I shared with you. Eubens, Hitesh, and Orson's, and Darwin's. They've all come out already. These are the manuscripts coming on the back burner or front burner. So Eubens' gratitude analysis of the gratitude lists, and then Robin's analysis of the daily affect, and then just some levity, right? This is kind of how it feels when you're looking for anything scientific, right? You're digging down and down, and then somebody up there is like, oh. And then also how beneficial it is to just be told, to be affirmed, to be validated by each other. What's coming next? We still have tons of data to analyze. If you saw all the questions we asked and all the opportunities for people to post information, like, for example, random acts of kindness. We asked people to name 5 people and then say what they do for those people. And so that data, that narrative data, which lends itself to analysis, is also on the strategic roadmap. We're also on the verge of running an RCT with a 7-day active control matched condition version of Big Joy. So it'll have activities that are maybe good for you, but not from positive psychology. So maybe it'll be, think of 6 ways you might organize your wardrobe. That doesn't sound very nice to do, but that wasn't a good spontaneous example. But or 7 places or 8 places that you visit on your way to work every day, or throughout your day. Just things that have a similar requirement and activity level, but are not from positive psychology. We'll assign people to either version of Big Joy, and we'll have more confidence in telling a causal story about the impact of engaging in these practices. We're really excited about any and all opportunities to assess any biological impact. There are so many devices now. How many people in here have an Oura ring? Wow. Okay. In California, like 3/4 of the room raises their hands. But those are these little things that, like, tell you, like, how well did you sleep, and what's your HRV on average, and what periods of the day were you the most stressed. It's like capturing a bunch of biometrics. That would be a really neat study to do. We've had conversations with scholars at Columbia who study mitochondria, the powerhouses of the cell. There's now kind of an emerging science of their relationship to stress and well-being. And wouldn't it be neat to show that they function better as a result of engaging with the Big Joy micro practices? And then, you know, we're totally open. We're excited. This was meant to be something that scholars could use. And reach out to me. You know where to find me if you've got ideas. These are all the places that you can either avail yourselves of Greater Good Science Center resources or get in touch with us. And that's all. I'd love to have any conversation about questions or ideas. I'll leave this up unless somebody wants to see something else. Yeah.
This is an excellent presentation. I just question, like, depends on the time of the year and how many times a particular person is taking this project. Do you see any variability, you know, like, let's say they took a 7-day course actually in the start of the year and they tried to do it again later of the year. Do you see difference in the, like, what is something which gives them a joy? Like, do you see any variability in that?
So the question is there an opportunity for people to do the Big Joy project in sequence repeatedly instead of just 1 week? And could that be something that would be beneficial?
I thought it's about seasonality.
And also, like, do you see any changes, right? Like in the different microacts, actually, the same person is taking the same thing start of the year and try to do it next year or later of the year. Do you see any changes in the microacts?
Great question. So if somebody did it multiple times, would it be the same one? You are anticipating another future direction that is more technological that I didn't put on the slide, but right now the Big Joy project is a once and done. In fact, if somebody tries to do it again, they would have to use a new email. Not a good experience. The Greater Good Science Center, for as technological as we look, we're not very savvy on that front. I would love for 2 things that address your question to be true in the next 6 months. 1, a person indeed could come back and do Big Joy repeatedly, and 2, that Big Joy will pull from a larger set of microacts. The Pathway to Happiness program, which we built first, actually does. It dynamically pulls from 96 different practices. We don't call them microacts in the Pathway to Happiness. We call them practices. And you can sort of specify to a certain degree your experience in the Pathway to Happiness. Big Joy, we just have to build that to make it work, and we would like to. We would also relatedly like to be capturing some longitudinal data to see if 3 months out, 6 months out, does this 7-day experience have a sustained impact on how people are doing. So thank you for that question. Yeah?
First of all, thank you. And two-part questions. The first is, have you taken this and drilled down to this kind of this behavior inside schools, in a specific school? And then the second question is, I have responsibility for about 18 schools around the world and 12,000 students, dialed into a number. Can you work with, like, okay, here's a group of 18 schools in this case, and try it out and get some data that feeds in psych circles within that 18 school population, or are you like too big for that?
Yeah. Okay. So question is about schools and whether we could run some kind of campaign or initiative in a set of schools. Yes. 2 answers. 1, we have an education team at the Greater Good Science Center whose sole focus is on schools, on supporting educators and education professionals and school climate, and providing, in fact, the ggie.berkeley.edu link is for something called Greater Good in Education. And it's kind of the analog to Greater Good in Action, but it's specifically tailored to school settings. 2, Big Joy is currently designed as a research tool as well as a public-facing resource, and we ask people to be 18, right? So
Yeah, I see.
you're not the first person to ask this question. We would love for our education team to tailor it, both in terms of language and kind of gestalt or aesthetic to be a good fit for youth. And we would love to do that. If we had the funding, we would do it in a heartbeat. But as designed, I don't know if kids would connect with it as much as we would like. But, you can also not consent to when you start the program, one of the first things you do is either consent or decline to consent to have your data included in analysis. So all the analysis that we're showing you says that our consent is from people who consented, and in consenting they have indicated that they're over 18. So we probably do have people who are interacting with it who are under 18, but we are not analyzing their data. And I'm more concerned about the fit question, about whether it's designed in a way that is cognitively and emotionally appropriate and or best suited for youth and different developmental stages.
High school, but
Yeah, high schoolers could probably do it.
Because they
Send me an email.
I'll do that.
I'll share it with my ed team. I would love to see that happen. And the data question we would have to address. If we were going to use the data for science, we would have to change our consent forms and all of that. So, and our approach to getting consent. Yeah.
Well, thank you for your presentation, first of all. I have two questions. The first one is if the big project was available in other languages other than English. And the second one, if you could include some results after some follow-up results after a few months, maybe.
So 2 questions. Is Big Joy project available in other languages? And 2, do we have any longitudinal results or data from people after a few months? Answer to question 1 is you can pick your language for Big Joy. It's 100% using Google Translate. We have not vetted and invested in having an expert look through and make sure that the way things are translated is veridical and optimal. We would love to do that. We would love to have a way to, meet the needs of people from a global audience. We do have a global audience. That was very important to Peggy and Jolene, that Big Joy was a global resource. Particularly, they wanted to make sure people in South Africa could use it, and people in India and Nepal could use it. So, yeah, we want it to be something that's globally accessible, that's translated into multiple languages. So we have that kind of Google Translate widget there. And regrettably, we don't have follow-up data at this time. I would love to gather it. We could. We just have to organize and sort of maybe warn people that we're going to reach out to them again 3 months later and administer another survey. We haven't yet. We have so much that we're still analyzing. Those awesome next stage ideas. Yeah, it's hard not to be doing them yet. So thank you. Yeah.
I'm curious, has there been any analysis around how these practices or microacts work for people who are at the lower ends of affect? For example, people with depression or even risk of suicide. Like, how do these practices engage with that? And have you found issues around falling into this idea of toxic positivity?
Okay, so 2 questions, and I'm going to come back to Eubin's finding. What do we know about the potential for the microacts to be useful for people who on the lower end, maybe who have depressive symptoms or anxiety symptoms or suicidal ideation? We don't ask that. We don't capture that, and we don't screen anybody. So we don't know if people have mental health challenges or conditions. We don't know if they're medicated. But what we do know is that people who score themselves higher tend to stick around and do more, right? So these kind of questions like social satisfaction, emotional agility, amusement as one of our other positive emotion questions. People who rate themselves higher on amusement tend to be slightly more likely to do more of the microacts. So there's something about doing better that makes a person more inclined to continue to engage. And I think, you know, writ large, the Greater Good Science Center has kind of a disclaimer everywhere that, like, none of this is for clinical application in isolation. Absolutely, I feel like there's strong data that as a supplement or a complement to routine clinical care, some of these microacts or positive psychology practices can actually lead to greater outcomes, but they should never be a replacement at this point. Yeah, second question, I forgot it.
In those cases, how do you kind of avoid the trap of...
Oh, toxic positivity. Yeah, I mean, two of the practices on here are not about trying to feel good, right? We have adopt a new perspective on a hardship, you know, gaining perspective on negative events, right? We're trying to get people to actually think about hardship and to figure out a way to channel that into some kind of psychological richness, some kind of meaningful learning and growth. Not stifle it, not pretend it didn't happen, not avoid it, but really to learn and grow from the experience. And then I think we're really careful about, again, not defining happiness as a perpetual string of pleasurable experiences. At UC Berkeley, there's a scholar named Iris Moss who published the finding that from something called the Valuing Happiness Scale, which shows that when people score really high on this, and this is like, I need to be happy all the time. If I'm not happy, I'm doing something wrong. People who score really high on that actually have poorer outcomes when it comes to well-being. So happiness isn't about this thing that you should expect to be about feeling good all the time or gratifying desires or accomplishing things. So it's really important to define it in the beginning in that kind of rich, broad way that's inclusive of unpleasant and difficult and so-called negative emotional experiences and events in your life. I'm a big fan of Shigeru Oichi's work on psychological richness and how in some ways that meaning and purpose that comes out of transcending difficult moments and kind of growing out of adversity can be a tremendous strength and something that contributes to your overall happiness in life. So yeah, thank you so much.
Great. I think we should stop here. I know there are many other questions, but thank you so much for doing this again.
Thank you.
You know, this is a part of our almost monthly seminar series on virtues of well-being, very intentional and deliberate given the times we are living in. So please come to our website, follow our social media. You'll hear more about the programs for the Center for Health and Happiness, as well as the speakers who will be coming in. So thank you again, and thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.